Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CAS 360 update webinar. My name is Warren, and I'll be taking you through the session today. Just a little bit of housekeeping, guys, to cover off from the start. Of course, this session is recorded. We will be recording the session and putting it up on YouTube in the next couple of days, so you will be able to watch it again. Obviously, everyone that registered will also receive an email with a direct link to the recording, so you won't miss out. If you do have any questions today, please type them into the Q&A chat box. We've got Andy from the CAS team here helping me out answering those questions. So please, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A. I will try to leave a lot of the questions to the end of today's session, as we've got a lot to go through. We've got 3 full CAS 360 updates to go through today. Before I get started going through the new features, I just wanted to draw your attention. We did a Director ID webinar only, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. We have posted the recording to that webinar on the CAS 360 community. So if you did want an ASIC and ATO or ABRS update and also a Director ID update, a lot of that is covered in this webinar. So if you have any questions on Director ID and things like that, I'll direct you to this webinar because today's session is going to be focused purely on CAS 360 new features that we released in the January, March, and May updates. So let's get started. So we're going to head all the way back to January. We're going to start off with our January release, and I'll start going through the features. So the first one was to do with our document review. So in your document review screen, so for those of you that are sending document reviews, I'll get in on how to send those in a second. But now when you are sending out reviews to your partners, your managers, these documents to be reviewed before they go to your client, what we've added is a filter on the left-hand side of this screen, allowing you to select and view who the documents have been sent to for review. So previously, it would just show you your documents that were there for review. Now you can see everyone's documents that are there for review, including obviously the people that you have sent documents to. So the document review feature allows you just to manage and, I suppose, check and see where those particular documents are at. If you wanted to use the document review feature, all that you need to do is click on Prepare Forms. And when you are going to send a document for review, you just need to flag that the documents are being reviewed. You'll be presented with a user list, and you can select that user. And that will mean that that particular user will be the reviewer for that document. Hopefully you are using the document review feature. Hopefully you're not sending manual emails out to your partners or managers, because that is exactly what this workflow is there to stop. So hopefully you learned with the first feature today, maybe a way of speeding up your internal firm review process. The way that the review works is once it's been approved by a partner or a manager or the reviewer, the document pack is then sent directly through to the client. Right, we'll move on, and I'll move on to the next feature, which is the document history modal. And what we have done inside that document history is added the review information. So if I was to go to my global document screen, I've got a document here that is sent for review. I go into Options History. That internal review process is now captured in the review process, okay? And if the review has failed, got one here, that will also be tracked in the history. So it will show you who the review was sent to and who passed or failed the review. So it's all completely tracked in the system. If there was a situation where a document went out that it had some incorrect information, we're certainly able to see who prepared the document and who reviewed the document, passed or failed. Obviously here I've got a failed, but the past reviews would be in there as well. The next feature I'm going to talk about is on the document screen. We've got a fair bit of functionality for the document screen in today's webinar. So what we have added on the left-hand side is a quick filter for all of your annual reviews. So if you just wanted to have a look at your annual reviews, you can click on that. Obviously, it includes returns if you've got companies from a different jurisdiction as well. So they will be there. But if you wanted to have a look at just your annual reviews, it'll include all of the statuses for those annual reviews. You've got a direct filter just there. Also in this update, and you may have seen it, it may have been the way that you registered for the webinar, but we have improved and changed the way we are going to show system notifications. So they are now obviously appearing at the bottom of your screen, but we do have different colors for different notifications. So if it's a system error, for example, we'll give you a particular color. If it's maybe a webinar, we'll give you a different color as well. Just sort of, you can have a bit of an idea and a bit nicer to look at rather than that yellow bar across the top. The next feature I'll touch on is the Director ID report. So we did release this sort of as part of a minor update in November, but January was its official update release. In your report screen, you'll find in other reports, you have a Director ID report. So Director ID is obviously a very topical and a very important legislation change and a really important compliance requirement for every company director. So if you haven't got clients getting their director IDs, please start. Anyone that is becoming a director for a first time must have a director ID before they are appointed now. That's the law that changed on the 5th of April. This director ID report will allow you to produce a spreadsheet of every single company director in your system, and it will give you their details, their email address, things like that, but it will also give you information on if they have a director ID or not, okay? As I mentioned, if you want to comprehensively cover director ID, check out the director ID webinar on the community. The next feature we added, again, was related to director ID. If I go to my annual review and I click on prepare forms, inside the document pack, we have the official ABRS director ID letter. Okay, so you can toggle this on and it will be saved. And then you can preview it if you wanted to have a look. It is the official ABRS director ID letter that they have asked us to include, or to give you the option at least to include. And obviously it has the director ID information in there. It is a one-page document. It is fairly similar to the introduction to director ID email that we have through the director ID workflow. But obviously adding it as part of the annual review process is a good communication touch point with your company directors and a good way to introduce them if they haven't already been introduced to the director ID requirements. All right, moving on. The next feature I'm going to talk about is the Director's Report and Director's Declaration, which are part of the annual reports and documents pack. So as part of that Form 388 document pack. So if I jump into my company, some of you may have seen this, some of you use this quite regularly. If I click on company information, I've got here annual reports and documents. If the company is not there, it's the first one on the screen here. What I'm able to do on this screen is obviously complete my annual reports, my financial reports and documents pack. So I can put in things like my annual return year, okay, financial report, annual reports return data, annual report minute data, Form 388 data. So it's all here, and I can put in things like directors' fees and re-election of directors and things like that. So it's all those functionalities have been there. What we have added as part of this update is 2 new documents as part of this pack. So again, this was based on customer feedback to, suppose, add more content to this particular pack, or add some documents that were being prepared outside of CAS 360 and sort of put together with this pack. So we've now added a director's declaration. Okay, so you've got now a default director's declaration to be signed and a director's report. Okay, so these director declaration and director report have been added to those document packs. Again, we've given you a baseline template which meets all the compliance requirements, but you can customize this however you want make it, if you like, better, put some more color, a bit more flavor to the document if you want. But those documents are now part of that default document pack for your annual return and documents, Form 388 pack of documents. The next feature that we added was the ability to have the ASIC balance merge field now supported on the annual review cover letter. So if I go to my annual review screen, prepare my annual review pack, But as part of that, I've got my cover letter toggled on. Now I've got a customized cover letter. Certainly I encourage you to add your own customized cover letter if you haven't already, although I think we have around 1,200 firms that have got their own cover letter in there, which is fantastic. So now as part of this feature, you can now put a merge field in for that ASIC balance. So if I have a look at my cover letter, I've now got a nice letter that's going out to the client. It's got my logo. The letter's written how I want. It's even got my signature at the bottom. And you'll notice now I have the official outstanding amount merge field appearing as well. So that ASIC balance. So the ASIC balance is slightly different to what we had previously, which was the annual review fee. So slightly different, but you've now got that ASIC balance merge field in there. So if the client does have any other fees, they will appear if you use the ASIC balance as opposed to the annual review fee merge field. So there you go. You've got an extra option for that annual review cover letter. All right, let's move on now to the March update. Now, the March update was a huge update. We added 4 or 5 really big features that I'll go through, and some real powerful features that were part of this. You may have seen some of this if you've been to RegTech or the masterclass. Some of these key features were really highlighted, but I'll go through them again now and obviously go through some of the smaller features that we released in the March update. So the first feature is the document screen filters, and if you use Simple Fund, you may have got this feature last night as well. It's a very similar feature that was just released in Simple Fund. But what we have got is this top bar across the top of our document screen, this search bar that's been added. And we've also got this advanced filters button, which will allow you to start filtering by any part of that particular document's metadata. So I can search by company name if I wanted to, trust name, by agent. So I can just filter by the agent. I can filter by document types. So I've got here a 484, for example. I can put a due date in if it's due in the next 24 days or due in the next 14 days or overdue. There's a penalty, okay. A particular trace number range. So if I wanted to search by a particular trace number range, I could do that. Status, okay. So I've got all my different statuses appearing here, including things like sent to client, DocuSign sent to client, Fuse Sign sent to client. Particular partners, so I can do a filter by a partner, and I can also do a filter by a label. So what we've got here is a really powerful filter. So what I can do now is click Apply Filter. And now CAS 360 has filtered all of my documents by this criteria that I've selected. Okay, so what I've been able to do is really drill down and find those particular documents that I'm after. Now, if you're working for a big firm and you've got maybe a couple of staff that help complete all of the corporate compliance work, what you're able to do is actually build filters for you, for the companies that you manage. To do this, I click back on Advanced Filter and go through those labels, and I might click on the labels that apply to me. Again, click Apply Filter. My filter will be refreshed with those labels included. And now I've got a filter that has been set up for just my clients. So for just the 484s that are overdue, that have been sent to the client, or just my clients. So you can see what you can do here is really drill down and find those key documents. What's also really good is now with that filter, I can click on Save, and I can say, Warren's late 484s. So what I'm now able to do is save that filter. And going forward, it will be listed in my Save Filters dropdown. Okay. So I've got that all saved, and I can produce this list, this filter, whenever I want. I've got unlimited amount of saved filters. So I've got here a couple of other filters. So maybe I want to have a look at just the Melbourne office, all documents. So what I've been able to do is I've got a saved filter. I can use this filter whenever I want, and it's given me a nice filter here for just the Melbourne office. Or if I wanted to have a look at my documents that have got 21 days or less. I've got no documents there that are due in 21 days or less. So what I've got here is a series of filters that are custom. We've got the preset filters on the left-hand side, but now what you've got is some advanced filters to really help you drill down and find whatever document criteria that you need. So I certainly hope that, that many of you have had a bit of a play with that document filtering and being able to sort of find those documents without documents falling through the cracks. The next feature I'm going to talk about is two-factor authentication on digital signing. So CAS 360 has had digital signing for a very long time, and we have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of documents that are digitally signed every week in CAS 360. It's fantastic to see. What we wanted to do is add that next layer of security. Two-factor authentication has become so prevalent throughout our life. You can't really get into anything these days without getting an SMS. Now, the two-factor authentication is not mandatory. It's an additional function that we've added. There is no extra cost to use the two-factor authentication, okay? And it doesn't matter what provider you are using, what digital signing provider. The two-factor authentication is actually very similar to the two-factor authentication that we have when you log in to CAS 360. So it is a BGL two-factor authentication that sits on top of the digital signing app. So when I go to prepare my form, what I'm able to do is click on electronic signing settings. And on this particular screen, which is new, we've got some toggles here to use SMS as two-factor authentication for signatories. So here I've got my two-factor toggled on and a message telling me that we don't have a mobile phone number for this contact. Now, at the click of a button, we are able to add that mobile phone number in. And that mobile phone number is now saved to that contact, okay? And you'll now see that that particular contact has a mobile phone number in the screen so that the two-factor authentication can be sent. Now, if there were multiple signers, we can do this as well, okay? And we can have multiple signers. So if I wanted a resolution here and then went to electronic signing settings, I'll see here I've got multiple signers. So this feature will support multiple signatories. Okay, so you can see here, I've got a couple that don't have mobile phone numbers. Now, what you can actually do if you want to, is you can turn the two-factor off for those particular signers. Okay, so I've toggled it off for those signers. Obviously, this particular director still needs an email address. But what I've been able to do is toggle it off for those particular signers that I don't want to have two-factor authentication. So you can have a mix of signers that have two-factor authentication and those that don't. You can also turn it off at a global level, okay? And that will turn it off for all signers. So what I'm getting at here is you've got a lot of flexibility. You can choose to use it if you want. You don't have to use it. If you are concerned or if you wanted to, or even if the case I hear most is the two directors having the same email address but having different mobile phone numbers, right? Maybe you want to use it in that instance. So you can use it for whenever you need, and the scenarios when you need. I've heard of some practices that have a requirement for two-factor authentication on signing because they really want to have that extra layer of security or that extra layer of authentication. So what we've done is we've built that functionality now in CAS 360. Obviously, in order to do that, we needed to put together a whole new interface and a whole new signing options page. So as you can see here, this signing options page has been greatly expanded, and it even has the ability where I can add an email address if I have a signer that doesn't have an email address. Obviously, for digital signing, we must have an email address for each signer, otherwise we can't get them to sign. So to add an email address, I can very easily add that in and hit save, all from this screen. And now that email address is attached to that new director. Okay, so we've added that functionality in as well so that you can add that content in when you don't have it. And also you can see each signer, you can see what documents they are required to sign. Okay, so all of them are signing that particular minute or resolution, except for Joe, who is signing the 484, the consent to act, and the minute and resolution. And that is all accessed via the electronic signing settings option. And obviously, when you are making signing changes, you may have seen this screen. Obviously, this has been put in to let you know that particular settings on those signing settings have changed as a result of those particular changes. And you're just required to confirm that And then that will update your electronic signing settings page with those updated changes. Hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully you are using the two-factor on digital signing where required. It's certainly an extra step of security. Staying with this particular feature, we also added an extra toggle. We kept the toggle, but we added extra functionality behind this toggle. So now by toggling this particular toggle on, the email signers a completed signed document pack, not only will the signers receive an email with all of the signed documents once they have been signed by all the signers, also now so will you, the preparer. So the preparer will also receive the signed pack once it has been completely signed. So that toggle will email all of the signers, the signed document pack. It will also email the preparer of that particular document pack an email. Obviously, the documents still come into CAS 360. They're still automatically attached and they're still saved against that document in the document screen. Speaking of the document screen, we added another feature for digital signing, and that is the ability to void a document. Okay, so voiding a document previously had to be done through the signing app. What we've done is we've now added that functionality to CAS 360. So if it is a DigiSign document, any of the providers, you can simply click on options, and there's now a new option here called void, and that will void that particular document. Does the same as if you voided it through DocuSign or Adobe Sign or Fuse Sign. It's just easier to do that through CAS 360 now. The next feature that we added is a bit of a different one, but what we have added is the ability when preparing a document pack to add an attachment here that is a .doc file. That's different to a docx. Obviously, .doc is rather old. I think it might go back to maybe 2007, but you can now upload a .doc file into CAS 360 as opposed to a docx, which you've always been able to do. The next feature is the ability to turn off lodgement for some users. Now, this has been sort of requested for a while now, and we added this functionality back in March. I'll show you how you're able to use this. So inside, when you click on the app switcher, there is a button called Users. In here, you'll have your user manager, and you'll have all of your different users, and those users will have different profiles. Okay. What you need to do is go to the role settings page, obviously select CAS 360, select the role setting that you are looking to change. Okay, and then just make sure lodgement has been toggled off. And that will mean that that particular user role can no longer lodge documents. So here we have an accountant user role, which is really focused on dividends and distributions, but you've got the ability for them to lodge or not. So up to you if you want to give the accountants the ability to lodge. So that obviously that functionality has been added. The next feature that we added in March was joint members and trusts being included in the multi-company change process. So this has been around for a little while, but now when you are preparing a multi-company change, I might not be able to get to exactly one, but I'll try. So if I have other contacts, okay, if I had a joint member or a trust contact here, so the BGL RegTech Trust 2019, when I go through and process this change, obviously it will prepare all the Form 484s for the companies that are being changed. It will now also update the trusts and the joint member records where there isn't so much a form that is required. Okay, so we'll do essentially a database update in this instance. Okay, so that those records don't have to be manually updated. The next feature I won't go through, I'll just mention. It is a bit of an interesting one, but users can now future date address changes for future dated shareholders. So if you are someone who is very efficient and you are putting in future dated transactions, CAS 360 does support future dated transactions. Okay, you can't lodge them because you're not allowed to lodge them until the day. But I suppose this is stacking those future date transactions. So if you have a shareholder that's being allocated shares in the future, and then they inform you that they're actually changing their address, you actually can prepare that now, which is nice, which you couldn't previously. All right, keep going with the March features and focus now on the next big feature for that March update. And this is one that has got a lot of great feedback. We're very, very happy to hear of a lot of firms that are using this now, hundreds and hundreds of firms using it, and it is the automated company debt reminders. So if I go into settings, we've added a new option here called automated reminders. And what we have here is the ability for CAS 360 to automatically remind your clients about outstanding company debt with ASIC automatically. It is simply a set and forget. Okay, so you've got a few options here. Obviously, you can choose how frequently you can send these reminders. Obviously, you need to choose who the sender is. Okay, the email template. So you're choosing here the email template that is going to be sent to the client. And then obviously if we are attaching an ASIC invoice or the CAS invoice or no invoice, and then who you are sending that reminder to. So we obviously support the billing contact here. That's probably the most popular, but we do allow you to send it to all company directors as well. Okay, so as I said, this is a set and forget. Once you've set this up and hit save, CAS 360 does the rest. What this means is every day when CAS 360 does your debt check, we are checking all the companies that have debt. All those companies that have an outstanding balance, we then check when their last reminder was sent. If the last reminder was less, depending on the 7 days I've selected here, if the last reminder is less than 7 days, we won't send a reminder. If it's 7 days or greater, we will send, CAS 360 will send a reminder to that client to pay their outstanding debt. So it is your debt alert completely automated. Now, we did have to make some improvements post this release to help with annual reviews, and we did this really quickly. So when it comes to annual reviews, obviously the company is issued with a debt and the annual review is delivered to you, essentially on the same day. When it comes to annual reviews, we won't automatically remind your client of the debt until you have processed that annual review. Okay, so there's a bit of leeway there where we sort of want you to process the annual review, send the invoice for the first time before the reminders kick in. So to give you an example, if I receive my annual review on Monday, but I didn't send or process that annual review until Thursday, the 7-day reminders, or whatever day you select for that matter, they will be essentially reset to 0 on the day that you send that annual review out. So the counter would effectively start on the Thursday after you have processed that annual review. So I hope that's really clear. It's clear for us, clear for me. But what we are waiting for is essentially for you as a practice to process the annual review before we start sending the debt reminders. We don't want to be in a situation where your clients are getting debt reminders for debt that they don't know exists. Okay, so that's why we have put in that special condition around annual reviews. So I hope that answers the questions. Andy, if there's questions, I'll touch on them later. But if you do have a question, put it in the Q&A and we'll get back to you. But as I said, hundreds of firms are using this automatic debt reminder functionality now. It's working really, really well. So I hope you are enjoying it. And certainly it's an area of the product that we are looking to evolve, is that automation area. Now, as part of the debt reminder function, we added another feature called the automation report. So this is the report that, for those that have debt reminders, this is the report that you are seeing when you first log in every morning. You are effectively seeing a report of all the automation activity that CAS 360 is doing, in particular in relation to sending debt reminders. So how this works and what the main purpose of this automation report is to show you the emails that we have sent, that the system has automatically sent out about the reminders, but also to show you any issues, such as not having an email address, that we encountered when sending those reminders. So obviously, if you are setting up your debt reminders, it is important that you have email addresses for the directors that you want to receive the emails. Otherwise, they're not going to go anywhere. So where that situation happens, where CAS 360 tries to send an email to a director, but no email is in CAS 360, that will appear as a fail on the automation report. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to grab some water. The next feature I'm going to talk about is purchasable constitutions, and more broadly, company registrations. So we've had company registrations in CAS 360 since May 2018. So we've had it for 4 years now. ASIC made some changes last year in regards to the requirements for a practice for an agent, to lodge company registrations. The ASIC actually removed some of the requirements. So now the only requirement you need for the ability to lodge company registrations is a direct debit account with ASIC. They're free to set up. It takes ASIC about a week to process. But once you have that direct debit account, you can start lodging company registrations. If you didn't know what form you need to set up a direct debit account, we have linked it at the top of the company registration screen. So what that means is that all firms, all agents can now lodge company registrations in CAS 360, which is great, and it really broadens the feature set and the functionality that you can use to use CAS 360 for. Obviously, if you are registering outside of CAS 360, you might be, depending on who you're using, you might be rekeying information. If you're using CAS 360, you are able to not rekey that information, especially if that person is already in the system. So the main feedback that we were getting about company registrations in CAS 360 was the ability to buy a constitution. So CAS 360 didn't have a constitution by default. You had to buy one, or if your firm had one, you could put it in. In March, we added the Buy Constitution button, and now you can buy constitutions from either Lightyear Docs or Smarter SMSF for $99 directly in CAS 360. These constitutions are pre-filled with all of the company data. So there's no rekeying of information, and the constitutions are specific to that particular company. Okay, so they all pre-filled with all the company data. So you are able to now purchase company constitutions at the same time that you register companies in CAS 360. I know we're in May, we've got June and July coming up. It's usually a very busy time for company registrations. You can register companies in CAS 360, just pay the ASIC fee, and then obviously the constitution fee. It's almost instant, and you're able to complete that company registration. Now, we are still integrated with a number of document providers. And if you are incorporating companies at a large volume, then you might get a better price through one of the main providers. So we integrate obviously with Lightyear and Smarter SMSF. We also integrate with NTAA and ClearDocs and Access. So there's a lot of different providers that you can use. With this particular feature, what we had in mind was those firms that were perhaps not doing many company registrations a year, maybe doing 15 or 20. Below those sort of volume numbers that the document providers tend to approach and give good deals for is when there is a significant volume of company registrations. If you are a smaller practice, company registrations happen every now and then. You might get 1 or 2 every 6 weeks or so. CAS 360 now gives you the ability to buy those constitutions really quickly and easily at a good price, and you don't have to enter into a lock-in contract or anything like that. So it's been great to see firms able to unlock some of this functionality and be able to purchase those constitutions. And if you haven't tried, I encourage you to have a bit of a try with the CAS 360 company registration and also the purchase constitution. While I'm on this screen, one of the features that we added in the May update was the ability for you to view a sample constitution from these providers. So as you can see, you've got a sample button there, and you can sample those constitutions before buying them, which is good. All right, the next feature I'm going to have a look at is the Director ID alert that has been added to the annual review screen. So I did touch on this a little bit earlier around director ID and annual reviews, and how the annual review can be a great touch point to communicate the requirements of director ID to your directors. So what we have added onto the annual review screen is the director ID modal, where you are able to view the director ID status of all of the directors involved in that company. Not only are you able to view the status, you're able to view things like their due date. You're able to send them reminders. You're able to see other companies that they are attached, and you're able to notify those directors directly from this screen. So it is a great part of your annual review process, your annual review workflow, to check the director ID status and to make sure that you have sent reminders or sent initial emails, as well, to those company directors to make sure that they are getting their director ID, because they need to, because they've only got 6 months left, and the financial penalty for someone who doesn't get their director ID, according to ASIC's website, is about $13,000. So it's not something that we want to be playing games with. There really needs to be a big push to get these company directors to complete their director ID. And that's why we've added so much functionality for it. The next feature I'm going to talk about is actually to do with our bulk annual review process. So some of you may use this feature a fair bit, but you can actually prepare your annual reviews in bulk. So what I've got here is the ability to select my annual reviews and then click Prepare Documents. This will actually go through the process of preparing those annual reviews in bulk. Okay, so I can select my document pack, select Deliver by Email. Here I've got my email addresses of who is being, those annual reviews are being sent to, and I can go through and process the rest of that. As part of this update, what we added is the ability for you to include things like billing contacts, company partners, and company managers. Okay, so you can include those in the emails that are being sent out in those bulk emails. Okay, so if you needed to include the partner or the manager in those emails, you can now go through the process of proceeding and completing those documents. You can also include the reviewer to be in that particular process as well. Okay, so very important if you needed to CC the partner or manager or billing contacts in those particular emails. The next feature I'm going to talk about relates to those director ID letters that I showed you for the annual review. We have added those letters to both the company registration process and to the officer appointment process. So if you are appointing an officer for the first time, the requirement is that they have their director ID when you appoint them. However, if you're not sure, I'll mention not sure, you can toggle on to include the ABRS director ID letter, okay, as part of that officer appointment document pack. And obviously we've done the same for company registrations as well. So that it's the same letter, it's the ABRS official letter. It's now included in all of your annual reviews, but also all of your officer appointments and your company registration document packs. The next feature is to do with the director ID algorithm. So, how do I say? As part of director ID, there aren't any APIs. Isn't much smart functionality we can obtain from the ABRS. We would love the ability to validate and confirm, I guess, a director's director ID. Unfortunately, none of that technology was built for software developers. What we have had to rely on is essentially an algorithm, similar to the company number algorithm or the TFN algorithm that we have in CAS 360, where we're able to check if it's a valid number, but we're not really able to check if it's the right valid number for that person. So what we've done in the Add Director ID is obviously you're able to put in the number. If you hit save and it is not a valid director ID, you'll receive this, okay? Where this can help is obviously in your clients are sending through director IDs and they're, I don't know the way to say it, they're sending you incorrect IDs. You can put it into CAS 360 and CAS 360 will at least validate that it is a correct director ID. Another thing that's important here is don't add DIR to the director ID. It's not part of the number. The number is just the number part, the numbers. part of the director ID. That's what we're validating for here. That's essentially what is going to be connected to that director in the future. So that has been added in. The next feature I'm going to talk about is all the way back to our annual reports and documents. And this is a consent to short notice. So we mentioned previously the director's report and director's declaration that we added. We've also added a consent to short notice document as well. So that has been added to this document pack. Again, completely customizable, but you can now prepare that consent to short notice for the company AGM as part of that annual return and documents pack. So really now that document pack is quite a complete set of documents. The next feature I'll talk about rather than show, and I know that some of you have come up with or had this issue from time to time because generally it involves a manual fix from our team. And that is now that CAS 360, we've added some logic to allow more than one annual review per company per year. So when we first built CAS 360, obviously wanted to make sure that the system was able to manage the more common scenario of the company only receiving one annual review in a year. So what we've now added is a bit of logic to support that situation where the company has changed its annual review date within that 12-month period and then receive a second annual review in that year. As many of you know, ASIC aren't nice enough to skip the fee if you've paid it already once that year. You still have to pay the fee. You still have to complete the requirements for a second time if you change the annual review date. So now at least CAS 360 will successfully receive the annual review, put it into your annual review screen, rather than giving you that notification where you essentially needed to contact us. The next option is we added the ability to select the signing director on the director's declaration. So again, it's to do with our annual reports and documents. Save and prepare. My director's declaration has the ability, obviously, to select the signatories from the director list. So you can choose who is signing that particular director's declaration. The next item I'm going to talk about, and it might have been topical for you over the last month in the office, it might be about to be topical, and that is trust distributions. So CAS 360 does handle all of your trust distributions, your discretionary trust distributions I'm referring to here. You are able to go to the trust, go to beneficiaries, distributions, review or add a distribution. So you can copy last year's distribution. We've added a lot of functionality for this. What you've got the ability to is put in all of that distribution information. What we added as part of this is a new income type, and that is a corpus distribution. So obviously if the fund was winding up, we can put that particular type, distribution type. But as you can see, you've got a huge amount of the possible distribution types that you could add in, including the default ones that we have, which are dividends, franked and unfranked, gross interest, and other income. If you wanted to have a look at some of the, I guess, the documents that we can prepare, I'll just prepare a previous one. I can go to something like my declaration of distribution resolution. Okay, if I preview that, I've got my distribution resolution completed here. This has just got other income, but you can get quite creative and add particular different templates that you want and have those appear as well. So that is that distribution. The next feature I'm going to talk about is just around director ID due dates and merge fields. So as part of the director ID initial email, what we're able to do is put in due dates into that email template, okay? So if I click on send reminder, we can put the due dates for the director ID into this email template. So it's not in the default one, but we have added merge fields to allow you to put the due dates into those director ID initial emails and the reminders, okay? All right, let's move on to the May update. So the May update, we've got a lot of smaller features that we have added. So I'll cover off on a couple of these. The first is company label search added to the company screen. So for those of you that use labels a lot, the labels screen here can get quite full if you've got a lot of labels. So what we have added now is a search where you start typing and it will auto filter those results. So that label search added to the left-hand side. If you do use labels a lot, I encourage you to star the labels that are most relevant to you. That will mean that those companies, those labels, sorry, are filtered by default. So you'll have those labels already pre-selected rather than having to filter them. The next feature I'll talk about is multiple company changes. When you are changing a company address, you can now prepare changes for any contacts that are also using that address. So if I go to my multiple company screen, click on a registered address change for example, I'll type in the company name, select the address. So I've got here address, and now I've got 5 contacts that are also using that address. So previously I would have to make a change for one of the contacts, but now I can just toggle that on, click proceed, and CAS 360 will go through the process of selecting all of those contacts that are using that address that the company is using, and will allow you to then proceed and prepare all of those documents. So essentially turning 2 processes into one with this feature. The next feature I'm going to talk about is the improved information hover for joint members. So if I go into Bean Super, go into my shareholders, you'll notice next to a lot of our contacts, we have this information hover, and we've tried to make them look really nice and have some good detail in them. Now, when you go to a joint member, previously it was quite poor. It didn't show you all the details. But now the joint member hover will show you the individual data, and you'll be able to look at other members of that joint member. Okay, so you'll be able to see the individual details that are attached to that joint member. And if you want to go to the contact, you simply click on go to contact, and you can view that joint member's contact record. Okay, so improving those hovers for joint members. The next item I'm going to talk about is adding the signing contact to the company screen filters. So a while ago now, it's been a while since we added this feature, but with the filter columns on the company screen. So you are able to obviously filter the columns that appear on the company screen and customize it to the most important columns for you. As part of this update, we added a new one called signing contact. So now you are able to have that signing contact appear on your company screen columns, so you can see exactly who the person required to sign for that company is. The next feature I'm going to talk about is adding the ability to prepare company reports from company data screens. So inside your company now, on your addresses screen, your officers screen, and your shareholder screen, you can prepare a company report at the click of a button. So to do this, click on Options, and you'll have Download Company Report, Officers, Options, Download Company Report, and Shareholders, Options, Download Company Report. Okay, so you've got that information there. All right, the next feature is one that, for those of you that are still preparing the documents out into PDF and then sort of mailing them yourself, you might find this feature really useful. So now when preparing forms in CAS 360, you've got your document pack, but we've added a new option to the download feature. So you've always been able to send the documents via CAS 360, but now you've got obviously the ability to, you've always had the ability to download, but now you've got the ability to download all documents into separate PDFs. Okay, so this will give you a separate PDF for all of the toggled options. So a separate PDF file as opposed to a combined PDF. What we've also added to document production is the ability for you to drag and drop attachments. Again, you've always been able to upload custom attachments via the upload button, but now if you've got those attachments and you've got a 34-inch monitor, you're able to drag them across and drag and drop the attachments into CAS 360's document production screen. A couple more to go. The next one I know will please many of you because I've got a lot of support calls and a lot of feedback requests for it. It is a rather simple one, but now if I go into my contacts, I go to add an identification type. First on the list is the Australian Director ID. This list is now sorted alphabetically. So the Australian Director ID just happens to be the first alphabetically. So you can add the Director ID obviously through this screen. You can also add it through the company screen, also now through the annual review screen. There are a couple of screens where you can add it in, but obviously adding it in this way should help. The next item, and many of you may have already seen this one, and it is our updated email template, I suppose our email template component. So this has now been updated to the latest version. So inside this email body here, you'll notice the icons are a little bit different. Obviously, it's a little bit better than the previous version. So we've updated this to the new version, which is good. Moving on with a couple more to go. For those that are completing lodgements for foreign companies, so in this release, we added the ability to electronically lodge ASIC form 490. So that is for foreign companies. So we've added that in. For company registrations, I've touched on the ability to purchase a company constitution, but there is an additional option, and that is to use the replaceable rules. So now inside your company, sorry, wrong jurisdiction. Now inside your company, you can click on Edit. And when you are setting up the company, you'll have this governance option. So this has always been there. But now if you select to rely on the replaceable rules, when you go and prepare the posting corp documents, you will have a resolution to adopt the replaceable rules as part of the document pack. Okay, so you've always got the replaceable rules. We've now added an additional document there for the directors to sign off that they have added or have consented to use the replaceable rules. Also, as part of the company registration workflow, when you are adding officers, we have added the ability to input the director ID. So if I go into process here of my company officers, if I go and add a new officer, 2 seconds, again, wrong one. If I go and add a company officer, when I add that officer, CAS 360 will check and tell me if the director ID has been added or not. Okay, so you can see here, this particular director does not have a director ID. Now, in theory, we shouldn't be proceeding with registering the company if the director doesn't have their director ID and this is their first ever director appointment. If they are already a director in another company, they may be part of the transition provision, which will allow them an exemption until the 30th of November this year. But if they are being a director for the first time, we really should be stopping them from or stopping completing this process until they get their director ID. If they get their director ID, you can quickly add it here if they've sent it through to you as part of the document pack, I guess, or part of your information collection. You can add it in via this screen. So that can be added in. It isn't a hard validation. CAS 360 is not going to stop you from proceeding purely because we don't know if this person is a director or not in another company with another agent, right? So we don't have a hard validation at this stage. I would say that come November this year, we would have a hard validation where every director is required to have a director ID. So adding a director ID will become part of the process, just like adding in a date of birth or an address for a director. But for now, we're sort of, I suppose, easing our way into it. Couple more features. First one here is adding an option to hide or show the corporate key at an agent level. Okay, so now you've got this new toggle here to hide the corporate key on ASIC forms. Obviously, you can choose to hide it. You can choose to not hide it, depending on what your firm's process is. But now you can save this at an agent level. I've mentioned sample constitution, so I won't go through that. The next one I'll talk a bit about is the debt alert will now show you rounded amounts. It will also now show you cents. Okay, so it will go to 2 decimal places. We'd had a couple of companies that had 25 and 50-cent debt fees. So it would actually say they had a debt, but it would say they owe $0. Technically correct, but it didn't show the actual cents amount. So we'll now show you the cents, which is good. You've also got the ability here to mark the amount as paid. Okay, so you can manually override the debt alert by marking it as paid. Obviously, if it's paid, then when we get the debt report tomorrow, it won't appear, but you can manually mark it as paid now. If you mark it as paid and then the amount is not paid when we get the debt report the next day, it will light up as a debt alert again. Okay, so just be aware of that. 2 more to go. We added the share structure to the comparison report docx and PDF. So either preparing a comparison report through options or through the annual review screen. The comparison report has always had a share structure, and now that share structure is part of the Word and PDF export. Okay, so that is now included. And finally, on the notifications, we have now added the user that lodged the document. Okay, so I'm not sure I have one here. Might not have a lodgement. I don't do too many lodgements. But now in your notification screen, it will have who lodged the document on those lodgement notifications. So you'll be able to see, who lodged that from within the notification UI without having to go into the document history. That brings me to the end of the new feature content. I got there with 2 minutes remaining. So guys, I just want to say a huge thank you for hanging around and coming along to the webinar today. I hope it was useful for all of you. You'll be able to watch the replay in a few days' time. But for me and for Andy, thank you very much for coming along. And it's bye for now. Have a great week. questions.